Hello, I'm Rick Hansen, and I'm glad you're joining with me in this program on stress-proofing your brain. Everybody wants to be happy. I want to be happy. You want to be happy. We all want to be in a state of steady well-being. We want to feel fulfilled and contented. We want to feel safe and unthreatened. And we want to feel loved and respected. Much of the time we do. But sometimes, maybe often, we don't. And at those not-so-good times, we feel frustrated and disappointed, or anxious and angry, or left out, unloved, and disrespected. In all those negative states of mind, one specific underlying condition of body and mind that characterizes those unhappy states of being. In a word, stress. So in this portion of the program, I'm going to describe two things. First, the machinery of stress in your brain, which is important to understand if you're going to gain greater control over it. And second, a different way of using your brain in dealing with life that is not awash in stress and is instead characterized by high levels of well-being. Then, in the rest of this program, we will explore different ways to train your brain to decrease stress reactivity on the one hand, and on the other hand, to increase a sense of balance, a sense of seeing the world clearly, feeling more positive emotions, and developing more contributions to others. This is what I mean by stress-proofing your brain. You can use this stress-proofing in many ways. You can use it to reduce psychological distress and dysfunction. You can also use it to improve your well-being and quality of life. And if this is of interest to you, and it is to me personally, you can even take stress-proofing your brain all the way to deep, deep levels of inner peace, unshakable happiness, and spiritual awakening. Throughout history, many beings have done exactly that. They've developed that inner peace, that unshakable happiness, and spiritual awakening, and they've done so even in the face of great hardship or difficulty. Life still happens to them. Life's not always great for someone who has truly awakened their brain. These people still have physical pain. They still get thwarted in what they attempt to accomplish. They face challenges and threats. They get criticized, even despised or vilified. And those they love or the causes they care about get hurt or die. Yet these people still manage to preserve an unshakable peace and happiness. These people, and many are alive today, have demonstrated and proven that developing a brain that is beyond stress is a genuine possibility. So in part of this program, we'll consider what is likely to be the nature of their brains, at least in terms of several central characteristics. And by understanding something of the nature of a brain beyond stress, you can train your own brain increasingly in that direction. Even just 20 years ago, there was not much understanding about how the brain operated. In other words, we didn't really have the tools 20 years ago to train the brain in increasingly positive directions. It's been estimated that the amount of knowledge in brain science has actually doubled in the last 20 years. Plus, it's been increasingly informed by the world's great contemplative traditions, which have had a growing intersection with Western science. Of those contemplative traditions, the one that has had probably the greatest synergy with Western science is Buddhism, because its model of the mind is the closest to that of Western psychology, and its fact-oriented empirical attitude is consistent with Western science. That's the tradition, by the way, that I'm the most trained in, so I'll use it as a model for what could be happening in a brain beyond stress, not to push Buddhism, but to use Buddhism as a kind of pointing out instruction for what's happening inside the mind and therefore the brain. In the famous saying, neurons that fire together wire together. In other words, science is showing increasingly how the flow of your own thoughts and feelings gradually sculpts your own brain. That means that in your life, right now today, you've got an historically unprecedented opportunity to use your mind alone in skillful and targeted ways to transform your own brain from the inside out. And that's fantastic. So let's get started. Since this is a program about stress, let's start by getting clear about what it actually is and how it works in your mind and body. Stress is a biologically based mind-body response of an organism, whether it's a rat in a maze or a human today in rush hour traffic, to a disturbance of equilibrium, characterized by high levels of activation, negative emotions, and, typically, an increased sense of self. For example, let's say you're trying to get a project done, under pressure in a short amount of time, with really not enough resources while being interrupted. Maybe it's rushing to get a report out for your boss under a deadline, or the kids out the door in the morning on the way to school. So in that example, the equilibrium, which means balance or evenness, the equilibrium of feeling that you are getting enough of the rewards in life you need is disturbed by not being able to get the reward here. In other words, the accomplishment of the task and the results will come with that. So your body and mind ramp up. That's the activation part. Your heart beats faster, adrenaline flows through your veins, the mind starts racing. Simultaneously, negative emotions come, naturally, like frustration, feeling pressed, getting concerned. And there's probably also a fair amount of self-referential thinking. It's a fancy way of saying that you're thinking about yourself. Like in the back of your mind, maybe imagining getting the rewards or failing to get them, with some self-talk going about what kind of person you are not to get them. Maybe talking to yourself about feeling unsuccessful or that you're inadequate or a flop. Or to use a second example, let's suppose something happens that makes you wonder whether you'll be all right financially, able to pay your bills. The equilibrium there of thinking that you are safe and okay in terms of money, which means that your survival is handled in our society, is disturbed. So, no surprise, you get a little jacked up there. There's a threat here. What should I do? How can I solve this problem? And you get flooded with negative emotions like anxiety, worry, and fear. I know I do if I start worrying about the bills or I get a letter from the IRS in the mail. Plus perhaps other feelings like getting angry with yourself that you're still on thin ice financially, or maybe angry with your partner that he or she is spending too much money or not getting a better job. There's probably also a heightened sense of self here, too. A view of oneself maybe as beleaguered, pushed around, small in a world of big forces. Or third example, maybe you get discounted, put down, like you don't really matter at work or at home. Maybe a coworker snubs you, or your teenager rolls her eyes like you are the biggest idiot in the world. I've been there in both situations. The equilibrium here of sensing that you belong, that you are connected to others who like you and care about you, has also gotten disturbed. And this is an equilibrium of belonging that was critically important to physical survival over millions of years of evolution, when our primate and then early human ancestors lived in small bands in very harsh and difficult conditions. So when that equilibrium is disturbed, the ancient echoes inside the mind are that there is a real challenge to survival. So, here too, mind and body rev up, they activate to deal with this challenge, accompanied by negative emotions like loss or rejection, heartbreak, worthlessness, and shame, plus a sense of oneself that may include feeling like you are less than others, an outsider, unwanted, unlovable. In other words, in all these examples of stress, plus, of course, in all the other ways the stress comes at you, an event occurs and the mind and body mobilize to cope with it. The stress response is a mode of coping, of managing life that is adaptive, that is an attempt to adapt to changing events in ways that, in terms of evolution, keep the animal, our ancient ancestors, alive, or, in terms of modern life, help us get through tough situations.